guys, it's Kelly and I'm back with another video. Today I'm going to be using some things from my favorite things. This is the Magnolia Blossoms Stamps and Dies. Honestly, I had a totally different game plan for these cards, but then I forgot I had the dies, so I didn't end up using them, but they do exist. I'm going to be using some 5x7 Strathmore watercolor paper, and we are finally going to do our comparison between Zig Clean Color Markers and Derwent Inktense Pencils. So I'm just going to cut this in half, which gives me a 3.5x5 panel, well, two of them. Here you can see I totally need to replace my blade on my cutting, my Fiskars trimmer, but I have not done that yet. And so I just cleaned up the edges of my watercolor paper with a pair of scissors and moved on with my life. The reason that this set is such a good one for this is because the images are the same flower, but there's two different images. So I didn't have to make the same card twice, which I really appreciate because, I don't like to make the same card twice. So I'm just going to go ahead and stamp this down using black ink. I went back and forth about whether or not to do no line coloring. And I'll be real with you all, no line watercolor just takes me a super long time. And I didn't have a super long time because all of my time is being taken up by my sweet baby. So I just had to get in what I could get in. Know what I'm saying? Before we get too far into this, I know I told you yesterday's video was the last sale I had for you, but then today, My Favorite Things announced that they were doing 35% off site-wide, and that includes their new releases. And so that is a really, really good sale because typically it doesn't include the new stuff, but this one does. So I have the 36 set of Zig markers. Oh, and I'll link the sale below if you're watching on YouTube. I usually say that. I didn't say it. Now I've said it. So I have the 36 set of Zig Clean Color Markers, and I have added to that. So you can purchase them individually. I have added to that colors that I felt were missing. And then I also have the 36 set of the Derwent Inktense Pencils. That's what I'm using here. So the one on the left is going to be Zig's. The one on the right is going to be the Inktense Pencils. They are two very different forms of watercolor, even though they are two forms that give you a little bit more control versus a pan watercolor or a more traditional watercolor set, or even liquids. There's some, like Hero Arts has liquid watercolors that are out there. I also really like those, but they just get used differently. So both of these I like to apply for my base layer just direct to paper. And then my typical go-to is I dip my paintbrush in the water. You can use a water brush like the pens if you are comfortable with those. I'm not. I don't feel like I get good control with them, so I just use a traditional paintbrush. But I dip that in the water, and then I will blot the base of my brush, not the tip. You want the tip to stay wet. You want to blot the base, which absorbs all the extra water. And this type of watercoloring gives you a great amount of control. Typically when people don't like their watercoloring, it's because they haven't found that like perfect amount of water for the look that they're going for. And usually it's too much. Usually it's too much water. So just having that paper towel on hand to kind of blot off what you don't need is going to be a huge help for watercoloring. And then I like to put my water down where I don't have any pigment, and then I bring the water to the pigment, not the pigment to the water. Here's why. If you bring the water to the pigment, then it gives it an opportunity to kind of organically spread out into the wet areas, which is the type of watercolor that I like. If you start where it's pigmented and drag that water to the dry areas, you're going to get a very consistent but very one-note color. It's all going to be the same color throughout whatever your image is. And we all know that I love the color variation. That is why I do it the way that I do, so that I think that the beauty of watercolor is how organic and how fluid it looks. And if you're dragging the pigment out, you're kind of losing that. Not that it can't be pretty. It can be pretty. But it's just not my preferred method. So that is how I'm going about it. A couple of things to note about the color palettes. So you saw me show you the swatch in the beginning of the Derwent Inktense Pencils. These are very hard to eyeball based on the color that's on the bottom. First of all, you can't eyeball them at all based on the lead for or the watercolor pigment, like the tip of the pencil, I guess I should call it. It's next to impossible because the yellow looks brown, the blues look black, like, but they do have them, like the tips are colored. I also don't think that these are wholly accurate, and that's why I have the little swatch, so I know what color I'm reaching for and what it's going to look like, and then I just keep this in my bag. For the Zig Clean Color ones, I don't have a swatch. I think I did at one point, but they're pretty true to what they look like, and I think it's because they do have the bristle brushes, so they're kind of already saturated with the pigment that's inside, so it's really easy to tell what the color is going to be. For the greens that are included in the Derwent Inktense pencils, they have a tendency to be a bit more on the true green side, and there isn't a dark green. There's a leaf green, which is like a yellow green, but there isn't a dark green, which I don't really love. I'm going to be real with you. I don't really love that. And there is 2 different reds, and then a, it's like Shiraz, not sure how to pronounce it, but that is a like pinkier red, which is actually what I'm going to use for my magnolias. But that, like, the orange you would have to shade with a red or a brown. Like, there's not a lot of good, I guess variety would be the way I wanted to say it. For the Zig Clean Color Markers, they do have a teal or some teals, but I don't own them and they didn't come in this set. So I'm kind of going to make my own. That's the other thing about the other comparison, I guess, that we're going to be making a lot of them as we go throughout. But the next one on the list is the color blending. Both of these allow you to blend various colors, so meaning colors from different families, really well. They work together very nicely. There isn't, like, I haven't found any color combinations that didn't work out well. And so for my zigs, I'm starting out with a, I think this is actually the May green. I'm starting out with that, and it's very clearly a yellow green, which is much different than the tealish kind of vibe we got going on for the Inktense pencils. But I am going to add some blues to them to make them appear a little bit more teal. As far as adding more pigment to your paper, I'm using such a small amount of water here. By the time I'm going back and adding in more pigment, my paper is pretty much dry. For the Derwent Inktense, how many times am I going to have to say that? For the pencils, I'm just going to say the pencils, and we'll all know what I'm talking about, because I cannot keep trying to enunciate that. You know I struggle with words. They are hard. For the pencil side of it, you can use them direct to paper if the paper is wet, and it will give you a much more intense color. However, that color is more difficult to blend out. It requires a lot more water to get it to blend, if it's even going to. Like, for real. Sometimes it doesn't want to blend back out. The zigs love water. They love it. So the moment you put any moisture on the paper, that color is running all over the place. So you have to be really careful to make sure you're only putting water where you want the pigment to go. Because once you touch that water to the pigment, it is going to go. I promise you that. So here, just adding in those blues and letting in, letting it kind of blend together and adding in some shadows. I did find that, and I knew this already, that as far as the color palettes go, the pencils are much more realistic colors. They're much more muted, whereas the zigs are much brighter and probably a lot more fun. So if you really like bright colors, which I do, but you're going to see, like, when we start coloring these, the magnolias for the pencils are much more realistic looking, versus the Zig Clean Color Markers, because it's so bright. And that alone, like, I always tell people when they ask me, like, about Copic markers, for color combinations. And the first thing I will tell them is, like, I have a page for Copic combinations if you're looking for it. But if you have to make sure that you are a person who likes bright color combinations, if you're going to purchase off my recommendations. If you're not a person who likes bright colors, then my recommendations are not going to work for you. Like my friend Dawn, she likes much more desaturated colors, much more gray based. She just likes a more muted palette, which is totally fine, and that's pretty as well. I just like to create with bright, fun colors. That's just me. That's what I prefer. So now here I've taken this reddish pink color, and I've put it down everywhere I want it to be the darkest. And then I'm bringing in my water and bringing that water to the pigment so that it kind of feathers out, bleeds out, however you want to word it, into the water. And I am happy, into the water. That's what I meant. And I'm super happy with the way that works for me. I have had several people comment, because I did a watercolor video not that long ago, that they felt like that they were bad at it, or that they weren't doing well. Somebody else had said they needed more practice. First and foremost, we all need more practice. Okay, let's be real. I'm certainly not watercoloring as well as other people in the industry, or as well as somebody who watercolors for a living. I'm not doing that, and that's fine, because comparison is the thief of joy. So don't compare your painting to my painting, or to Dawn's painting, or to Mary Jo's painting, or to whoever's, because all you're going to do is find the things that you feel like you're falling short on. Don't do that, because I'm sure your card and your watercoloring is beautiful in a different way. So, do you need to practice? Yes. Do I need to practice? Absolutely. So you can always hone your craft, and you can always get better at something. And the more you do it, the more that you will increase your likelihood to do it well. But that doesn't mean that you're starting out making trash. So here, you can see that this petal was still wet, and you can totally tell the difference. And I'm going to show you here specifically that once you put a little bit of water down and then you put the pencil over top of it, those two petals are so much more intense than anything else. The other way you can do it, which is how I prefer to, is once you have your base layer on and you want to add varying colors, you can take your paintbrush, water brush, whatever, and see here, you can see how hard this is to blend out. It's like impossible, and I'm going over it, and like, watercolor paper is meant to take water, but even it will eventually pill if you just keep at it. So what I like to do is I like to take a wet brush, not sopping, just, a little bit wet, like we talked about, just the tip of it is wet. And then I like to rub it right on the pigment from the pencil, and then it will pick it up and you can drop it in, which is using it like more traditional watercolors. And I really like the result with that. I like how I can kind of add in the shadows where I want them to go, or add in darker colors. Here, a magnolia is like a pinkish purple magenta color, and I don't have that. I cannot make that with what I have in these pencils. Doesn't mean the flowers aren't pretty. I think they are. You can certainly leave me a note in the comments below and let me know what you think. But I do... I was trying to come up with something as close to that as possible. So I did this reddish pink base color, and then I did a violet in the areas that I wanted it to be the darkest. Some of them got a little too much violet, and so I just picked up the red and, well, I'm going to call it magenta. That's what I'm going to do. I'm committed to that now. The magenta color, and am dropping that back in where I think it needs more of that color. And then So once this is done, we're going to move on to the other one. And so here you can see just how vibrant this pink is, and it's only going to get brighter because it's just that once the water hits them, they just, like I said, run like crazy. There's no issues with either one of them with layering colors on top of the other. Both of them did really well with that. And like I said, the different color families, they both did really well with that. There's a couple of more things we're going to do as we move on, but I'm just going to let you kind of watch me paint this one. And if there's anything of note, like usual, I will let you know. So, yeah, pretty much all of our days just kind of run together. Isn't that that's just where we're at in life right now? It is different having 2 kids versus 1. I will say that that's something I don't think you can really prepare for, meeting 2 children's needs, or multiple children if you have more than 2. I don't. Apparently we're having an issue. I can hear it downstairs. Like, we've just gotten home from school and there's already conversation being had. So I'm hoping that he'll be able to turn it around. Because sometimes kids just do what they do. What are you going to do? And because I don't have Peanut all the time, sometimes we have these issues just simply because we're tired. That's what I was going to say was, so like this morning, my wonderful husband did the middle of the night feeding at 3:30, and then I had to get up at 6:30, even though Caitlin wasn't due to be fed until 7:30, because Peanut comes home on the nights that he's, like, when he spends the night with his dad, he comes home the next morning at 6:30 in the morning because his dad has to be at work at 7. So like I had to get up at 7 to get Peanut, even though my newborn didn't need to be fed until 7:30. And sometimes when he has a couple of days in a row where he has to get up at 6:30, like today is day 2, he is just tired, and that can lead to some grumpiness. Or if we've had rough homework, like the one day, and I love teachers, like I have nothing but respect for teachers, but for some reason his teacher she wouldn't send home math homework Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, but then on Thursday we would have 3 math worksheets and like one of the Go math classes online. And I'm like, why do we have all of the math homework in one day? Like, I didn't even, and I'm not one of those parents, like when I was growing up, if somebody came to my door and was like, your daughter did XYZ, my mother would never doubt you. She would immediately be like, yeah, that was probably my kid. She did it. Like, she was not that kind of mom who was like, my princess would never. And neither am I. Like, I am aware of what my child is capable of. Because Lord knows, we're parenting them, so it's not like I'm blind. So I had even asked him, like, are you just not getting your work done in class? Like, how is it that we're ending up with 4 different math homeworks in one night, and it's taking eons to do? Like, he would come home and he has to do his homework right after school because we had a little bit of a problem where we weren't getting our things done in a timely fashion when I would let him wait. So now we can't do that anymore. So he comes home from school, except for the days that he has swim, which he does have swim today, and that's why I'm trying to knock out this voiceover right now instead of later in the day. And so he literally sat there he got home from school, he had a snack, and then we sat at the kitchen table from 4:30 until 9:30 with a half an hour break for dinner to do these 4 math worksheets. And he said no, that he was doing the work when he was given the time. So I sent an email to his teacher and I was like, hey, he says X, but I'm not sure if that's true. Back to the card real quick. So here with the Zig Clean Color Markers, I would not recommend taking them direct to paper once your paper is wet, because they are bristles like a paintbrush. It tends to absorb the water and not put any pigment down. So what I like to do with this one is I just take an acrylic block You could use any non-porous surface. And I like to scribble the marker right on there, and then I can pick that up with the paintbrush and I can drop it in where I want it to go. And obviously you can see the intensity, the brightness. There's a huge difference. But I did use the same. I used a pink. The Zig Clean Color Markers have reds in them, but what I've noticed is even with the darker reds, when they blend out, they have a tendency to look pink. They don't really look like a true red if you add water to them. Something else to know, the clean color markers you can totally use with no water at all. You don't have to blend them out. The Inktense pencils, because they are a pencil, you would have to do quite a bit of coloring to fill in all the pores of the paper to use them as regular colored pencils, and it would be just such a waste of this product. Like, I just don't think that it would be worth it. Where the Zig Clean Color Markers, you know, they're a marker and they have a tendency to fill the paper pretty quickly. Another thing to note is here I kind of got out of the lines when I was doing the second flower. They pick up very differently. So the Zig Clean Color Markers pick up relatively well because they are so reactive with water. If you have a boo-boo, you can kind of go over it. Pinks or reds are going to be the hardest ones to pick up. The Derwent Inktense pencils don't pick up as much. And then one of the other things that I wanted to do, this one, just because I do a lot of backgrounds, like I don't own a lot of pattern paper, or I don't typically use that in my card designs. I wanted to show you how they blend out in large areas, which is completely different. Completely different. So for the Derwent Inktense pencils, if you use them direct to paper, they don't blend out great because you're using a pencil to try to cover a large surface area. It's hard to get rid of those lines and it doesn't look good. I have a much better time doing a background if I put down water where I want my background to be, and then I use that paintbrush tip method to kind of drop in color where I want it to go. That's a much better, much softer background. The Zigs, you can go straight in with the pen because, again, they love that water and it just fans out really nicely to wherever there is water. So make sure you're putting down enough water for it to spread wherever you want it to go. But anyway, back to Peanut. So I sent her an email and I was like, hey, like, what is the deal here? And is he behind in math? Like, it shouldn't take us 5 hours to do math homework. For this background, don't be afraid to take your paper towel and go in and blot up an area that you don't like. I felt like my top corner was really blocky and it wasn't blending out soft like everything else. So I just went in there with my paper towel and blotted it up, and I was super happy with that. But yeah, so I was like, is he behind? Like, it just shouldn't, I don't think it should take him this long to do this much homework. Like, why are we getting 3 or 4 worksheets in one day? Is he not doing them like in class like he's supposed to? And she was like, no, he's not behind. No, he does what he's supposed to do when he's in class. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So like the intention is for him to have 5 hours of homework. I don't know how I'm supposed to balance that with the, just living our lives and like feeding him and showering him. And he doesn't have really any extracurricular activities that he does besides swim. I don't know how parents who have their kids in like football and soccer and basketball and, I have no idea how they balance their schedule with homework. Holy smokes. Like, I really don't. And so with both of them, like trying to get to her doctor's appointments, because obviously she doesn't have any activities right now. So, make sure that we get him from school when we're supposed to, and she, get her to her doctor's appointments that she needs to go to. We are relying pretty heavily on both of our mothers. So they come one day each. Well, my mom will come here, but I also live down the street from her, and so typically I take Caitlin there. But it gives us 2 days a week where we can have like a couple of hours to accomplish things. So for those of you who have asked how I am managing to get cards done, that is how I manage to get them done. with the Zig Clean Color Markers, it's very difficult to get any semblance of shading, like at all, and that does bother me about them. So here I just went back in with like a navy blue to try to encourage some sort of shadows and some sort of dimension, but because they're so bright, it's very, very challenging to achieve. I typically use them for backgrounds, I'm just being honest. Here you can see how they pick up. So I've just added some water and blotted it with a paper towel. The Zig Clean Color Markers, you pick up a ton of pigment, and I'll show it to you again. Just make sure that you're careful when you're using the same paper towel, because that pigment will transfer to your card if you aren't picking up a clean side every time. The Inktense pencils really didn't pick up too much. Again, you'll be able to see there. It just doesn't, I think they're closer to a more traditional watercolor, where once they're dry, they don't really move. Here, I'm just going to add in that purple back that I just picked up because I want them to blend a little bit better with that darker line. As far as putting the card together, I had to cut some of it out because this video is already really long. But I did some gold dots in the center, just to add a little bit of metallic. I did outline them with a black writing pen just because I like a bold black outline. And then I also trimmed them down. I trimmed them down to, they were already at 5, so 4 3/4. I just cut off a quarter so that it would be an even border. And then I put them on 2 different colors of cardstock. This test I did simply for card makers because, you know, I love to put some shimmer on there. So the Inktense pencils pretty much didn't pick up any pigment whatsoever when I went in with my glitter pen. So this one is the Nuvo one, but it would be the same thing for the Wink of Stella. And then the Zigs, if you don't let them dry, or if there's a ton of pigment on there, you will get some lift from your colors. So just be advised, like, you can't scribble all over the place with it, because if you put this out onto the white paper, you're going to drag the pigment. But then that's it. I stamped some sentiments, added some gems, bada bing, bada boom, we're done with the card. So I hope that you will check out that sale. It is only for today, only Tuesday, November 30th, that 35% off for my favorite things. And I thank you guys so much for coming, and I'll catch you on the next video. Bye.